The day I found the piano was like any other Saturday, rummaging through neighborhood garage sales looking for forgotten treasures. But this particular find was different. Nestled among the usual array of discarded items was an old, ornate piano. It looked out of place with its intricately carved legs and faded keys, a relic from a bygone era. Its presence seemed to cast a shadow over the other mundane objects. I remember the seller, an elderly woman whose eyes flickered with a mix of relief and unease as she saw my interest in it. She told me it was a family heirloom, but her eagerness to part with it struck me as odd. There was an unspoken urgency in her voice, a desire to get rid of it as quickly as possible. Despite the piano's eerie aura, or perhaps because of it, I was drawn to it. I felt a connection, an unexplainable pull. As the piano was loaded onto my dad's truck, the old woman leaned in close and whispered, almost inaudibly, "Be careful with that thing. It's old, and it has a history." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, but my curiosity was piqued even more. Back home, the piano took its place in our living room, its aged wood and faded ivory keys, adding a touch of mystery to our otherwise modern decor. I sat down in front of it, my fingers hovering over the keys with a sense of reverence. I had never been particularly musically inclined, but something about this piano made me feel like I could play. The first note I struck resonated through the room, it sounded clearer and more beautiful than I could have imagined. The melody that followed seemed to flow from the piano itself, guiding my hands. The music was haunting, almost otherworldly. It filled the room, and for a moment, I lost myself in it. That night, I lay in bed, the piano's melody replaying in my head. It was mesmerizing, enchanting, but there was something else, a feeling I couldn't quite place. It was as if the music had awakened something, a feeling of anticipation, like the calm before a storm. The next morning, the neighborhood was abuzz with unsettling news. Mr. Henderson, the elderly man who lived a few doors down, had vanished without a trace. No one saw him leave, and his house was left untouched. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist. As the news of Mr. Henderson's disappearance spread, a sense of unease settled over the neighborhood. But for me, the unease was accompanied by a nagging suspicion, a connection to the haunting melody I had played the night before. It was a ridiculous thought, yet I couldn't shake it. The piano, with its mysterious past and the old woman's cryptic warning, seemed to loom larger in my mind. Unbeknownst to me, this was just the beginning. The melody I had released was more than just a tune. It was a harbinger of something dark and inexplicable. And as I would soon discover, playing that old piano had set in motion a series of events that would change everything. In the days that followed Mr. Henderson's disappearance, I found myself inexplicably drawn back to the piano. Each time I played, the melodies seemed to become more complex, more captivating. It was as if the piano had a life of its own, its keys whispering secrets from ages past. The music wasn't just heard, it was felt, resonating deep within me. Then, another disappearance. 2 days after Mr. Henderson, it was Mrs. Collins, the kind librarian who lived at the corner of our street. Like Mr. Henderson, she vanished without a trace, her house eerily silent and untouched. The neighborhood was in a state of quiet panic now, the air thick with unspoken fears and suspicions. I should have seen the pattern then, but I was too caught up in the music, the power I felt coursing through me as I played. It was an addiction, the piano calling to me, its melodies echoing in my mind even in the silence of the night. It wasn't until the third disappearance, a week after I brought the piano home, that the chilling realization hit me. It was young Timmy, barely 12, known for his bright smile, and the way he zipped around the neighborhood on his skateboard. The news sent a cold jolt of fear through me. This was no coincidence. There was something horribly wrong, and it was connected to the piano. I started to research, poring over old newspaper clippings and internet articles, searching for anything related to the piano or its previous owners. The task was daunting, but I was driven by a growing sense of dread. What I found only deepened the mystery. Every previous owner of the piano had a tragic story. Accidents, unexplained disappearances, even rumors of madness. The piano seemed to leave a trail of sorrow and darkness wherever it went. But the most disturbing discovery was a series of old diary entries I found hidden in the piano bench. They belonged to a young girl who owned a piano in the early 1900s. Her words were frantic, filled with fear. She wrote of the piano's power, how it demanded to be played, and the terrible things that happened when it was. The diary entries ended abruptly, but her last words stayed with me. The piano must not play. Its melodies are not of this world. They call to them, the ones who listen, and they vanish into the shadow of his song. I was terrified. I had unleashed something beyond my understanding, something ancient and malevolent. The piano wasn't just an instrument, it was a catalyst, a gateway to something dark and unknown. And I had opened that gateway. As I sat there, staring at the piano, a chilling thought occurred to me. The piano had been silent since the last disappearance. But what would happen when it played again? Who would be the next to vanish into the shadow of his song? The weight of my actions pressed down on me, a burden I could no longer ignore. I had to find a way to stop it, to silence the piano before it claimed another soul. The urgency to understand and stop the piano's ominous power consumed me. I began to observe a frightening pattern. The piano seemed to play itself, emitting faint melodies late at night, as if calling out to someone or something. Each time it played, another person would vanish. The link was undeniable now. I started to avoid the piano, but the music haunted me. It played in my dreams, an endless eerie symphony that left me waking up in cold sweats. The neighborhood was now gripped with fear. People whispered about a curse, about ghosts. Some even talked about leaving. And amidst it all, the piano sat in our living room, silent and brooding, like a dark sentinel watching over us. Determined to break this cycle of vanishings, I dove deeper into the piano's history. I spent hours at the local library, searching through old records and newspapers. It was there I met Mrs. Wallace, an elderly historian with a wealth of knowledge about the town's past. She listened intently as I told her about the piano and the disappearances. The vanishing melody, she murmured, her eyes clouded with a mix of fear and recognition. I thought it was just a legend, a ghost story to scare children. But you say this piano is real. Together, we unearthed a chilling legend. The piano, known as the Vanishing Melody, was said to be cursed by its creator, a tormented musician who infused his anguish and despair into the instrument. According to the legend, the piano housed a malevolent entity that fed on the souls of those who heard its music. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but knowledge alone wasn't enough. I needed to find a way to stop the piano, to end the curse. Mrs. Wallace suggested that the original creator might have left clues on how to break the curse within the piano itself. I examined the piano meticulously, discovering hidden compartments and cryptic engravings that alluded to a ritual, a way to appease the entity within and break the curse. The ritual required a piece of the piano, a personal item from each vanished person, and a melody to bind them. The task was daunting. How was I to find personal items of the vanished? It felt like an impossible quest, but driven by a sense of responsibility for the chaos I had unleashed, I started my search. I visited the homes of the vanished, each visit a painful reminder of the lives disrupted by the piano's melody. I found Mr. Henderson's old pocket watch, Mrs. Collins' favorite book, and, most heartbreakingly, Tommy's cherished skateboard. With each item, the weight of my task grew heavier. The final piece of the ritual was the melody. I had to play the piano one last time, a thought that filled me with dread. The idea of once again releasing its haunting music into the world terrified me, but I knew it was the only way to end the curse. With the items gathered and the ritual prepared, I sat at the piano, my heart pounding in my chest. The house was silent, the air thick with anticipation. I placed the items around me, took a deep breath, and began to play. The melody that flowed from my fingers was unlike any I had played before. It was a song of sorrow and hope, a plea for forgiveness and release. The piano responded, its keys moving with a life of their own, the music filling the room, enveloping everything in its haunting embrace. As the final note hung in the air, the world seemed to hold its breath. And then, something extraordinary happened. The piano's dark aura lifted, the oppressive atmosphere dissipating like mist in the morning sun. For the first time since I brought the piano home, I felt a sense of peace. But the ritual was not without its consequences. The piano, now silent, was forever changed. The entity within it was appeased, but not destroyed. The threat was gone, but the memory of what had happened, the people who had vanished, would always linger. I knew then that the piano could never remain in our home. It had to be taken somewhere safe, somewhere it could do no more harm. The mystery of the vanishing melody would remain, a haunting tune echoing in the annals of our town's history. The piano was taken away, but the memory of its dark melody, and the lives it touched, would never fade. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal, but the shadow of the piano's curse lingered. We were all left with a deeper understanding of the unknown, a respect for the mysteries that lie just beyond our perception. And as for me, I learned a valuable lesson about curiosity and the dangers of unearthing the past. Some melodies are better left unsung, some secrets better left undiscovered. But the echoes of the vanishing melody would forever haunt my dreams, a reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown. In the aftermath of the ritual, the neighborhood slowly began to recover, but the shadow of the events lingered. People spoke in hushed tones about the disappearances and the mysterious piano. I felt a heavy burden of guilt. Though I had stopped the curse, I couldn't bring back those who had vanished. I continued to collaborate with Mrs. Wallace, seeking to understand more about the entity within the piano, and ensuring it could never harm anyone again. We pored over old texts and obscure references, piecing together the puzzle of the piano's dark history. It became clear that the entity was not entirely gone, it was merely dormant, its power diminished but not destroyed. The realization that the piano could never be played again weighed heavily on me. Its presence in our home became unbearable, a constant reminder of the sorrow it had caused. I knew it had to be removed, to be placed somewhere it could never be played again. Mrs. Wallace helped me find a solution. A museum dedicated to paranormal artifacts agreed to take the piano. They understood the need to preserve and protect such items, ensuring they couldn't cause harm. The day the piano was taken away was bittersweet. I felt a sense of relief, but also a profound sadness for the lost souls and the unanswerable questions they left behind. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. But the memory of the vanished lingered, their absence a silent testament to the piano's curse. I visited their families, offering my condolences and support. The guilt and responsibility I felt were overwhelming, but I knew I had to face them, to acknowledge the part I had played in their loss. I kept in touch with Mrs. Wallace, who became a mentor and friend. She helped me navigate the complex emotions and the lingering fear that the curse might one day return. Together, we ensured that the piano's history was documented, a warning for future generations about the dangers of unearthing the past. As for me, I found a newfound respect for the unknown, the cautious approach to the mysteries that surround us. The experience with the piano had changed me, opened my eyes to the thin veil between our world and the unseen forces that lie just beyond our understanding. The story of the vanishing melody became a local legend, whispered about in the dim light of fireplaces and during quiet neighborhood gatherings. People spoke of the haunted piano and the brave girl who had stopped its curse, but I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a survivor, someone who had unwittingly unleashed the darkness and managed to contain it, albeit at a great cost. The piano's absence left a void in our home, but it was a necessary emptiness. I sometimes found myself listening for its melody, a haunting tune that lingered in the back of my mind. But there was only silence, a silence that was both comforting and eerie. I often wondered about the vanished, where they had gone, and if they were at peace. The not knowing was the hardest part, the unanswered questions that haunted my dreams. I hoped that wherever they were, they knew I had tried to right my wrongs, to bring closure to the pain the piano had caused. The piano itself remained in the museum, an object of curiosity and fear. I visited it once, a few years later. It sat in a dimly lit room, silent and imposing. I felt a chill as I approached it, a sense of unease that I couldn't shake. But there was also a sense of closure, a feeling that the story had ended, at least for now. As I left the museum, I looked back at the piano one last time. It was just an object, wood and strings and ivory, but it held a power that was beyond understanding. A power that was now contained, but never truly gone. The vanishing melody was a reminder of the thin line between curiosity and recklessness, a tale of a melody that should never have been played. But it was also a story of redemption, of facing one's fears and taking responsibility for one's actions. In the end, the piano was gone, but its legacy lived on. In the quiet of the night, when the world was still, I could almost hear its music, a faint distant melody that was both beautiful and terrifying. A reminder that some mysteries are better left unsolved, some secrets better left hidden in the shadows. I walked away from the museum that day with a heavy heart, the echo of the piano's haunting melody, a faint whisper in my mind. The experience had changed me, marked me in ways I was still trying to understand. I had faced something otherworldly, something that defied explanation, and had come out the other side. In the years that followed, I became somewhat of a local legend. People would sometimes stop me on the street, their eyes wide with curiosity, and ask about the piano, about what really happened. I would offer them a small smile, a nod, but I kept the truth close to my heart. It was a burden I carried alone, a secret that was mine to keep. Life moved on, as it always does. The neighborhood healed, the memories of the vanished slowly fading into the background of everyday life. But for those of us who had been touched by the piano's curse, the scars remained. We shared an unspoken bond, a collective memory of the darkness that had once lurked among us. I often thought about the vanished, about their last moments before they were consumed by the piano's melody. In my mind, they were not just names in a newspaper article, they were real people, with hopes and dreams and stories left unfinished. I wondered if they had found peace, or if they were still trapped somewhere, lost in the shadow of the melody. The piano remained a mystery, its origins and true nature a puzzle that might never be solved. I accepted that some questions were destined to remain unanswered, that some mysteries were beyond the reach of human understanding. The piano was a reminder of the vast, unexplored territories that exist just beyond the edges of our reality, a testament to the mysteries that lurk in the shadows. As I grew older, I found solace in the mundane, the simple joys of life. I took comfort in the laughter of friends, the warmth of the sun on my face, the beauty of a world that was, for the most part, predictable and safe. But there was always a part of me that looked over my shoulder, that listened for the faint echo of a melody that might never come. The vanishing melody was more than just a story, it was a part of me, a chapter in my life that I would never forget. It was a tale of curiosity, of darkness and light, of the thin line between the known and the unknown. It was a reminder that we are all just small pieces in a much larger puzzle, a puzzle that is vast and mysterious and endlessly fascinating. And sometimes, late at night, when the world is asleep and the air is still, I can hear it, a faint, haunting melody, drifting on the edge of my consciousness. A reminder of the piano, of the lives it touched, and of the mysteries that are always there, just out of sight, waiting to be discovered. In the end, the vanishing melody was not just a story about a haunted piano. It was a story about us, about our innate desire to explore the unknown, to understand the mysteries that surround us. It was a story about the human spirit, about our ability to face the darkness and find the light. And it was a story that would live on, a melody that would never truly fade, echoing through the ages as a haunting, beautiful reminder of the mysteries that lie just beyond our reach.